Hello YouTube, welcome back. We are now entering week 3 of tRicK MiRRor Book Club, and this essay was kind of wild. I think it was probably my favorite essay so far, and I've already read like 2 more essays after this one, so yeah, okay. I took down some notes this time because the other 2 times I've just like gone on my phone and kind of just talked about the parts that I highlighted, but this time I feel like she covers so many very different topics in this essay that I needed to organize it somehow. So, okay, I'm gonna try to summarize first what this essay is about for those of you who haven't gotten a chance to read it yet. It's kind of hard to explain. It's very concerned with various mechanisms that we use in our daily lives to make ourselves more productive than we already are, and this isn't just limited to your work life. It almost seems like work and leisure are kind of blending together more and more as we chug forward into the future. There's a lot of like cyclical patterns in this essay that I will address soon enough. I feel like I mentioned it a little bit in week 2's video, but now we're getting into the thick of it, and it comes back in later essays. This is kind of what I think this entire book is trying to get at, but maybe that's just what I've chosen to pay attention to. Let's start to talk about some quotes and stuff. So she opens and closes this essay with a discussion of what we typically think an ideal woman should look like. Maybe not an ideal woman, like the ideal woman, but then in the middle of the essay it's like more broadly applicable, I think. So page 65, she writes, "Most women believe themselves to be independent thinkers." And then later on that page she writes, "But the psychological parasite of the ideal woman has evolved to survive in an ecosystem that pretends to resist her. If women start to resist an aesthetic, like the over-application of Photoshop, the aesthetic just changes to suit us." So she brings this in later too, but to me this speaks on women were expected to wear makeup for a long time in order for us to fit this image of the ideal woman, but now more and more there's all these like campaigns on embracing your natural beauty, but not only that, there's like all these makeup brands like Glossier that are coming up that are like makeup products that are designed to look natural. And I also remember when I used to watch a lot of like beauty vlogs, people would make videos about the no makeup look like all the time, and that is just kind of the direction in which our society has headed in. And yeah, it's great like being able to embrace natural beauty, but we're not really expanding our definition of beauty that much. We're just kind of like restricting it in a different direction. This will come back later. Alright, so on page 66 she writes, "Figuring out how to get better at being a woman is a ridiculous and often amoral project. A subset of the larger, equally ridiculous, equally amoral project of learning to get better at life under accelerated capitalism. In these pursuits, most pleasures end up being traps, and every public-facing demand escalates in perpetuity. Satisfaction remains under the terms of the system, necessarily out of reach." So this to me is kind of like her thesis statement. This is what summarizes everything that's about to come. The language is kind of hard to unpack right now, but in all the examples she provides later on, I think it becomes a lot clearer. So the first example that she writes about is Sweet Green. So for those of you who don't know what Sweet Green is a fast casual salad restaurant. I actually don't know if Sweet Green really exists outside of like coastal cities. I'll just Google Maps this real quick. Alright, so there's a bunch of Sweet Greens in Manhattan. There's like 2 in Brooklyn. Let's go to California. Yeah, okay, so there's a Sweet Green in SF and then a couple in the Bay Area. Let's check out the entire country, see if they'll let me search that. No, it keeps bringing me back to New York. Okay, so Wikipedia says that as of March 2019, it had 91 stores in operation in 8 states across the US, including California, Colorado, Illinois, Massachusetts, New York, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Texas, and DC. So not exactly just coastal, but it's still like very interestingly dispersed, especially because like there's no reason that Manhattan how many did it have? It literally has, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 17 Sweetgreens in Manhattan. And I think the Bay was like 5 or 6, which is surprising to me. I feel like I would expect the Bay to have more, but yeah, out of 91 stores, it's just kind of a ridiculous distribution. Definitely reminds me of like SoulCycle and other boutique fitness classes. And don't get me wrong, I'm not like trying to trash Sweetgreen or boutique fitness classes. I'm just trying to explain like what it is, what its cultural significance is. Yeah, they're kind of designed for a very particular like young professional type. So on page 66, Gia writes, "The ideal chopped salad customer is himself efficient. He needs to eat his $12 salad in 10 minutes because he needs the extra time to keep functioning within the job that allows him to afford a regular $12 salad in the first place. He feels a physical need for this $12 salad, as it's the most reliable and convenient way to build up a vitamin barrier against the general malfunction that comes with his salad requiring an enabling job." So yeah, that should explain a little bit of why I was so concerned with finding Sweetgreen's locations. This also is one of the cyclical patterns I was talking about before. And the next example that Gia writes about is bar classes, which I was less familiar with. They're like this genre of boutique fitness classes that combines ballet with like other dance forms. So yeah, so she goes into the history of bar classes pretty extensively in this essay. It was kind of hard for me to follow, so take a look at that if you're curious. But on page 75, she writes about how she started going to bar classes. She writes, "Bar was much too expensive for my grad school budget, but I kept paying for it. It seemed very obviously like an investment in a more functional life." And then she draws a comparison between bar and Sweetgreen on page 76, where she writes, "Bar feels like exercise the way Sweetgreen feels like eating. Both might better be categorized as mechanisms that help you adapt to arbitrary, prolonged agony." That was a mouthful. Now, I know I brought this up in the last essay, but I feel like part of the reason why this is my favorite essay so far is just that it hits a little too close to home. Like, I feel like you don't even need to know what Sweetgreen and bar are or even have done them before, and you'll still be able to relate on like a surprising number of levels. So this is kind of where she starts talking about how we often connect people's physical appearance with ethics, which she says obviously like ties into beauty standards, especially as they apply to how we think of ourselves. So on page 78, she writes, "Under this ethical ideal, women attribute implicit moral value to the day-to-day efforts of improving their looks, and failing to meet the beauty standard is framed as not a local or partial failure, but a failure of the self." And of course, all of this is tied to the failings of mainstream feminism. So on page 79, she goes into that. Basically, maybe, yeah, I'll just read this whole section because I think it's very important. She writes, "Mainstream feminism has also driven the movement toward what's called body acceptance, which is the practice of valuing women's beauty at every size and in every iteration, as well as the movement to diversify the beauty ideal. These changes are overdue and positive, but they're also double-edged. A more expansive idea of beauty is a good thing. I have appreciated it personally, and yet it depends on the precept, formalized by a culture where ordinary faces are routinely photographed for quantified approval, that beauty is still of paramount importance. The default assumption tends to be that it is politically important to designate everyone as beautiful, that it is a meaningful project to make sure that everyone can become and feel increasingly beautiful. We have hardly tried to imagine what it might look like if our culture could do the opposite, de-escalate the situation, make beauty matter less." So that ties into a lot of what I was saying about Jenny Zhang's work in that one video I made about like books I rated 5 stars on Goodreads. I think this comes through in a lot of her work, though also definitely in Sour Heart and in interviews she's done. Like, yeah, it's great that we are expanding the definition of beauty, but like, why are we still so concerned with everyone needing to be beautiful? Like, it just doesn't make that much sense to me how much value we place on beauty to begin with, and how this is also connected to mainstream feminism. She writes on page 80, "The root of this trouble is the fact that mainstream feminism has had to conform to patriarchy and capitalism to become mainstream in the first place," which is, I think, her concluding message, if you will. Of course, like, creative essays are not gonna follow the like structured like thesis statement, body conclusion format that we're used to in school. But yeah, I think this is the central like concluding message. And in her ending, she brings back the image of the ideal woman. She writes on page 89, "The ideal woman looks beautiful, happy, carefree, and perfectly competent. Is she really? To look any particular way and to actually be that way are two separate concepts, and striving to look carefree and happy can interfere with your ability to feel so." And then she brings it back to the internet and what we saw in the first essay, and how it exacerbates literally most problems, almost all problems. I was gonna say every problem, but that was maybe a generalization a little too far. So yeah, this was a very cool essay, probably my favorite. Oh yeah, she like brings in Black Mirror episodes. Okay, yeah, I thought this was a great balance between bringing in like research and also her own experience. There was a comment that I got on week 2's video where Christina suggested that I read John Irving's The World According to Garp, which I'd actually never heard of before. Like, I've heard of John Irving. He did Sleepy Hollow, right? Okay, turns out The Legend of Sleepy Hollow is actually written by Washington Irving. I was close. I was close. Alright, so I guess I don't actually know who John Irving is. That's embarrassing. Thank you for the recommendation, Christina. I will definitely have to check it out. Next week's essay is called Pure Heroines, which is about female protagonists in young adult and also adult literature. Leave any questions or comments you might have down below or on the Goodreads discussion page. The link to that is also down below. And yeah, thanks so much for following along, and I will see you next time. Bye!